So then in answering the question of where did all this begin, people having stereotypes, and do we say it has been there always? Because then people maybe sat and are like, how do we figure this group of people, and then started having these stereotypes? Where do you think it came from? Sonia, sorry.
I mean, that's a bit difficult to answer. Where did it actually come from? Because when a child is born in a family, he is or she is in a certain environment within a certain community, and we can say it's as long as time. But perhaps what we need to look into now is the culture that we're living in the Kenya today, which is modern, and people interact with each other, though everybody might not feel what I'm saying right now, but I certainly am from that environment where people mix with each other, so that's really not an issue.
Yeah, and mostly then it would affect perhaps those people who have not, as you're saying, people mix with each other, so then it becomes more or less of it's normal, it's what they know. But it becomes a challenge for people who are not necessarily used to being with all these diverse groups of people, and then they're exposed to that, and then now they begin to have the challenge, as you were saying, to try to identify where do I place these people. So unanswered questions then leading to this kind of stereotypes.
I think the natural instinct of man, of humans, is to identify or to seek citizenship, to belong, a sense of belonging.
Right.
And because, there is never any straight-jacket answer to any single human being, and we can never really quite say, Sonia is, and people don't take their time to do this actually. You can, but people don't take their time to actually describe who Sonia is in her entire humanity.
Right.
We will say Sonia is Asian and she's a woman.
Yeah.
And because she's Asian, an Asian woman, she must be XYZ. And it has been with us from time immemorial, since, the ancient times.
Yeah.
When then we try to identify or give Sonia a certain citizenship, a certain sense of belonging, purely because we do not have the time to want to find out who Sonia truly is.
Yeah. Let's talk.
I think just to add on to that, I like the term that Ronnie used about laziness, because it really is a laziness. And just to emphasize what he's saying about not taking the time to understand people, because you want to fix them into a certain box, and that box suits you, and it suits what you want to imagine about the person, so you simply fill in those blanks yourself. You will not go out of your way to actually find out if Sonia operates or is, what we normally use the term typical, because we like to say, oh, that's a typical Kenyan. That kind of behavior is very typical of those people.
Peculiar Kenyan behavior.
Yes. So you see, so we simply want to fix them in a certain way and in a certain space. So we'll simply just say, oh yeah, that's normal. I mean, did you expect anything different?
Right.
No.
I think it also goes back down to experience. If, for example, and also what your elders say, for example, they'll say certain type of people are just so and so, and you go by what they have said to you, and then you wouldn't even want to try and approach somebody like that, or an experience that you've had with just one person, and then you brand everybody just like that.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, Jesus suffered
Stereotyping.
Stereotyping, and people asked, did anything good ever come from Jerusalem?
Right.
And they were talking about Jesus, and therefore this thing has been with us for
time memorial.
For a long time. It is part of humanity. I think it's a very natural, instinctive thing for people to do, and you need to have a very conscious and deliberate effort
not to get sucked in. Okay. Let's break it down further to the types. I mean, because we've heard of all manner of things. I mean, there's the bigger scenarios when we're talking about the ethnic, and we're talking about racial, tribal, all under ethnic, and there's also gender. I think you'll really come in on that one. But just for you, which are some of the classifications you'd talk about, some of the types of stereotyping, and perhaps even share examples if you have undergone some of that, had a personal experience, Ronnie?
I think one of the things that defines stereotypes are issues of competence. So people want to place you based on their understanding of your competence. So you will have a gender stereotyping where they say, a man is stronger than a woman. A woman is more emotional than a man. And, so it's all around competence. You have religious stereotyping, where people believe that because you're Christian, you must be, a fundamentalist. Because you're Muslim, you are so and so. You have sexual orientation, and people will say because you dress, a man dresses in a pink shirt, and the ladies here this morning are all in pink.
They're all in pink. Isn't that amazing? Yeah,
that's lovely, actually.
But because you're a man and you're dressed in pink, you must be gay. You have and maybe let me not hog the entire the entire space.
Yeah.
But I think stereotypes categories are many.
there are many.
There are many. You have professional stereotypes. Because you went to Harvard, you must be better than the guy who went to Moore University,
Right.
for example. And you're stereotyped. I mean, in an interview, people look at your CV and
The
they
minute
say,
they hear Harvard, ooh,
the minute they hear Harvard, they say, that's the guy to hire.
Yes.
And it happens even in boardrooms. Because you are the finance director, you must be better and sharper than the
accountant,
or human resource
human
director.
resource, yeah.
So you always have a more special place in the boardroom.
Yeah.
So stereotypes comes in different forms and in different places.
All right, Sonia, your thoughts on the types?
I think for me, it's quite apparent from my background. It has always been about color. Because of where we've been born and brought up. I mean, I'm second, third generation being in Kenya now. And so the thing is, some people have not been able to understand my character, but they judge me on the basis of my color. And I've got many friends who are judged on the basis of color. And they say, because you're Mwindi, therefore X, Y, Z.
Would you share with us some examples?
For example,
some of those situations
because you're Mwindi, you must be very rich, or you don't feel very close to our African or Kenyan counterparts, and you don't mix with other African friends, and you don't have African friends, which is totally wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, some of us have gone to school where most of the students are from a multiracial cultural background.
Yeah.
And we prefer being that way, which is totally wrong. And I think that's what we need to make Kenyans understand these days, is that things have changed, and whenever we come out as one Kenyans, and not as just being one race or tribe.
And let me tell you, just on building on what she said, one of the things that sometimes I find extremely frustrating is when you have a multiracial gathering and people will say there were Kenyans, Muhindis, and Muzungus. And I'm thinking, who tells you the Muhindis and the Muzungus are not Kenyan?
Are not Kenyan, yes.
Right.
Yeah. I'll take on that. The more common one, the one we all talk about, which is tribal.
Tribal.
Yes. We can try and quote it and make it cosmetic and say there's professional stereotyping or religious. But before we become religious, I think as Kenyans we are first tribal.
Very.
And unfortunately, and I think I don't know how long this could have been going on, but at least one thing that is very clear in my mind, I think, was 2007 put it more loudly than any other previous election that we had,
Right.
where we, the battle lines were drawn so much, and there are, oh no, sorry, actually I think it was the 2005 referendum.
Right.
Yes, I think where where people actually voted the referendum more to do with, okay, they could have their reasons and all that, but I think that was the time now we started realizing that people will actually vote on certain issues based on their tribal blocks. So, it's unfortunate that we live in a society where tribes have actually been made to look more negative than being a positive trait of the Kenyan society, where, we've branded certain tribes to behave in certain ways. And sometimes, I don't know, but to a certain extent, some of those tribes have ended up behaving, in a certain way. Because, if you actually come into this room and I put 3 mobile phones, on the table and do it in a certain manner, people will say, oh, you just must. I think we all know what tribe those, the very flashy ones.
Let's call it out.
The Ronnie ones.
From the lecture.
Yes. And the same thing about talking about, being in Harvard. I remember when I was growing up and there was this joke that, some people would say, oh, you still go to University of Nairobi. We went to Yale, not just Harvard, for that
Oxford.
matter. Yes, Oxford, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's even said in a certain way. So even as children grow up, they know, oh, those must be Luos, because those are the flashy kind of people. And not that there's anything wrong to actually being flashy, but we have
if you
tended
have it, flaunt it.
Yes. If you flaunt it, then you must be of a certain group of people. Yeah.
Okay. I want us to, because we've talked about different types of stereotypes that we've seen around, but I guess that also the question becomes, are they all bad? I mean, do you have the neutral ones like, yeah, okay, so if Ronnie sits here with his iPad and he's on an interview, maybe he's, an iPhone.
An iPhone, which I don't have at the moment.
So there's that. Is that really bad? Is there anything bad with that? And then there is the question of, for example, instances where you have people saying that people from a certain community or certain people are very brilliant. Is it bad to be known as the really sharp people? Because a child being born in such a society then already is coming up with this challenge of, oh, I have to measure up. Is that necessarily a bad thing? But also, we're talking about tribal, we're talking about gender, so there are those really bad ones. So can we break it down? Are all stereotypes bad necessarily, or do we have neutral ones which are okay, we can joke about a few things, and then there are the really grave ones which we need to deal with, and then there's what's okay because it inadvertently helps us perhaps become better. Ronnie?
I think stereotyping inherently prevents us from fully understanding people. In that sense, to me, it is then a bad thing. But generally, you also have what you would otherwise call profiling, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And you'd say, because it makes life easy for everybody, a recruiting agency, for example, will say, I'll give you a psychometric test. If you answer it in a certain way, then I probably begin to understand who you are, what you can be able to do, what you can't do, which is all part of profiling, which is a sub-category of stereotyping, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
I think it begins to become negative if it, for example, begins to influence our kids to start thinking, I must be of a certain type because I'm Luo, so I have to be flashy, I have to be arrogant, I have to be, all these stereotypes that I have to throw stones, all these stereotypes that we put around tribes. And because now you're beginning to cage people and you're beginning to give them a certain sense that for you to belong, because you're of a certain tribe, you must behave in a certain way. So fitting people within their stereotypes, and people begin to grow into those stereotypes. Those things then begin to become a hindrance to our nationhood, because then you have people who cannot relate amongst themselves because they think I'm from a sub-tribe that you're not from, so we are inherently different. We begin to fail to understand that we're actually from one tribe called Kenya. Now, if there is any stereotyping that we need to do, then we need to do it at a national scale and say, because we are Kenyans, we love one another, we always support one another, we celebrate success, all these values that we would want to be associated with being Kenyan.
Okay. Sonia, would you say there are positive elements? Because, for instance, if we say those are really brilliant people and everybody just grows up wanting, to measure up, to be like their tribesmen or their community members.
I'm trying to really understand this word stereotype this morning.
Right.
Because for me, when I go out, I see a certain, for me, it's a class issue. That person who can afford to have maybe a bigger meal than those kind of people who are not able to afford that kind of meal and don't sit on the same table every day. And in fact, if I take it a step further, if you own that iPhone, what I'd like to know is, can you share that iPhone with me? Right? This is the problem here is, forget about the stereotyping, it's we aren't able to mix with each other. If you find a group of friends who are, say, maybe who only go to a bar across the road and don't go to Panari for instance, you won't find them mixing with each other, not because they can't afford it, perhaps they can't even get along with each other. So for me, it's not only about a cultural issue. And if we talk about a cultural issue, let's break it down to the fact that after what happened at the West Gate, I was amazed to see Kenyans coming together. I didn't hear at that point in time people saying, this is a Mwindi, we can't work with them, or this is an African, or this is a Mkikuyu,
or my
we can't
blood
do that,
cannot
or
be used
exactly.
by after I donate. Yeah.
That was totally out of the window. And then when we look at that, we actually wonder, how long will it take before I go back to my home and start stereotyping again?
Yeah. To the comfort zone.
Yes. So I think I'm going to drop that question to you.
Well, you see, and now that you bring in the Westgate element, you see what tragedy does, or such crisis does, is it pushes everyone out of their comfort zone. So it is no longer about what is the easy path. It's about its necessity, it's survival. And when your survival instinct kicks in, you're more human than you normally are, because that's the natural response to the situation, and the natural response to the situation has no stereotypes.
All right.
The